back to the CTs again. So common table expressions, and common table expressions is it's introduced in 2005. It's basically a temporary result set that can be referenced within a select, insert, update, or delete statement that immediately follows the CTE. Okay. So as I was mentioning, it's just basically you can save the result set from anything in a CTE, as we were doing here. Okay. We were basically saving this result in this CTE, and that can be referenced along the way. Okay, you can reference this result, like just imagine this result set will become a separate table, which is not stored in the database, but it's it will become a virtual table that you can manipulate. Okay.
Similar to views, yeah?
Exactly. Yeah, similar to views, but the difference is views actually get created in the database.
Yeah.
But CTEs, they are not created in the database. They're not stored anywhere. It's just on the air. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the syntaxes we start with word keyword with, and then you give a name to your CTE, and then you start as, and then the query. Okay. And your query can be anything, and whatever the result of your query, that will become a virtual table, and then you can do your select statement, update, join, whatever you want from that CT. Okay? Yeah, it's as you mentioned, it's really like a view, but the difference is you will it's not stored in the database.
Yeah.
Okay. So the CT can be referenced by it can only be referenced by a select, insert, update, or delete statement that immediately follows the CT. So what it's saying is, if I try to, for example, there's the select statement, right? Let's copy this CT first to a separate place. Okay, and let's delete this part. You see, it will be effective only in the select statement or whatever statement that comes right after the CT. Okay, so if I say select customer name from CTE, and if I run this, you see, I get the customer name, right? Because my select statement is coming right after this CT, okay? There is CT, and there is right after that, I have my select statement, and there is nothing in between, okay? Now, if I do this, select customer ID from CT, okay? Now let's try to execute this one. You see, now it's saying invalid object name CT. So this is not recognized in this select statement, because this select statement is not following the CTE immediately, okay? So only the select or whatever statement that is right after the CTE can recognize the actual CT. But if there is something else in between, like in this case, the second select statement, the CT is already not recognized. So basically, it's like a temporary memory. Like this CTE is only recognized or only saved until the next SQL statement. But like it's after just one SQL statement, the next SQL statement, it's already forgotten. So basically, the SQL server will forget this CT after this one statement. Okay. So if I run this, it will give me a result because this select statement is following the CT immediately. But if I do it another select statement after this select statement, the second select statement will not recognize the CT. Okay. See? It's saying invalid object name CT. So now it doesn't recognize the CT. So the point is CT can only be referenced by a select this statement that immediately follows the CT. Okay.
Yeah.
So select hello, and then if you select this will not be recognized because there's already one SQL statement before this. Okay. It has to be right after the CTE so that it can be recognized. If there is something in between, then it will not be recognized. So CTE exists like only for short scope, like very small scope. Okay, short amount of time or the scope. It can only be recognized by the statements, SQL statements that follow immediately. That's all. Okay. Okay. This is creating multiple CTs using a single with clause. This also we already saw. So you put this comma, and then you can keep creating the CTEs. Okay, so you basically create one CTE. Then after that, you create another CTE, and then within that CTE, you can reference the previous CTE. Okay. So basically here, if you see what's happening is they're selecting the department name, amount of ID as total employees from table this and joining this and this, where department is in payroll, IT, and group by department name. Basically, they're selecting department name and how many people work in those departments. Okay. And then they're again selecting the same thing from HR and admin. And then after that, they are unioning. See, union, you remember the union, right? Just joins the two result sets, unioning these two results from the CTs, one CT and second CT. Okay.
Yeah.
So the point here is you can have multiple CTs within one with clause, and then you can keep referencing each other, this CTs in across this other CTs. Okay. That also we saw in here. See, I have this comma. Basically, I have this CTE, and then the second CTE, and within that CTE, I'm referencing the first CTE. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I can actually do here is I can also say select from CTE2, select customer name from CTE, and say where customer, where CT equals to New York. Okay. And then I can union and do the same thing and say where CT equals to London. Okay. So this CT will give me the people from customers from London, and this will give me the customers from New York. Okay. So now let's try to run this and see what happens. Oh, I guess there is no. Oh yeah, we did not select in the CTE or customer ID. So this, let's not do that. CT, CT2. Yeah, in here we'll also do the same thing. Select start from CTE, and then if I run this, I should get the customer names from London and then New York. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm joining these two CTs. So the point here is you can have many CTs, one after another, and then you can keep referencing those CTs with each other. So this is the first CT, and then the second CT is referencing this first CT inside it. And then after that, I'm selecting the data from this both CTs, the CT and then the CT. Okay. So this is the point. Like the concept is that you can have multiple CTs followed by comma. Then you can keep referencing them. Okay. Now this is like a beginning of the CTs. And now let's move on to updatable commentable expressions. Just like if you remember from the previous lesson, we had updatable views, right? So now we have updatable CTs. Okay. So the point here is what happens if you update a CTE. Like in views, unless this view is being like referenced by any like the base tables are being referenced by like multiple joins, you can update that update that view, unless the base tables are have some foreign key relationship that would cause orphan records. So the CTEs is so the question is again, is it possible to update a CTE? And then so just like views, if a CTE is created on one base table, then it is possible to update the CTE, which in turn will update the underlying base table. Okay, let's try that in action. Basically, what we're saying is, let's put the topic updatable CTs, and let's create this CTE again. Okay. So if the CT is based on one table, that means inside the CT there is no join, right? So the CT is using only one table here, right? Then you can actually update that CT, and that in turn will update the table itself. Okay. So first, let me copy this here separately. And let's see what we have now. So we have this, and let's try to update this 0 to, let's say, 333, okay? So what we can do is, we say, just like we would update any other table, we will say update. In this case, we're updating the CTE, right? Update CTE, set grade equals to 333, where customer ID equals to 3001. Okay. And then if I run this, one row gets affected. And now the first thing, now let me remove this part and then try to select start from that CT. Okay. So if I select start from the CT, you see this got updated, right? This 333. And if I select start from the actual table, you can also see that this record got updated in the actual table also.
Yeah.
Okay. So the point is you can up the CTE if it uses one table as a base table, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This in turn will update the actual table, okay? So if there's only one table is being used in that CTE, you can update that CTE, and that in its turn will update the actual table that is being used inside the CTE, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's move on. So in their case, in this case, updating the employee name, gender, CTE updates the employee table, just like because they are using the employee table inside their CTE. Just like we were using the customer table, if I updated the CTE, it will update the customer table that is being used inside the CTE. Okay. Okay. Now, what happens if the CTE has two base tables? So the note is if a CTE is based on more than one table, if the update affects only one base table, then the update is allowed. Okay.
Yeah.
For example, in this case, they're selecting this and that from this table and then joining another table, right? And then updating the CTE and setting the male where ID equals to 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this means this gender and this ID, they both the employee table. Okay. So, and updating that doesn't affect the department table because department table doesn't have the gender column. Okay. Now let's also see that in action. Say updating CTE with two base tables. Okay. Now let me copy this CTE again. And then this time we'll join tables. Okay. Select from customer join salesman. Okay. On C salesman ID equals to S ID. And now let's select customer name, city, and then salesman name, and salesman city. Okay. So if I select start from this CTE, let's see what happens. Customer city, CT. Okay. Now what's happening is I am specifying this CT twice, right? But the CTE, well, if I basically run this select statement by itself, it's it gives me this result, right?
Yeah.
But if I select everything from the CTE, now it gets confused because there is two CT but they come from two different tables. But I'm trying to say select everything from the CTE. For that, I can try CT as customer CT. Now let's see what happens. You see, now it selects it because now it has two different columns. Okay? One is customer CT, the other is CT. So when you're doing when you're using multiple tables within one CT, you should be careful when you're naming the columns. You shouldn't have like two columns that are coming from two different tables and have the same name. Okay. Otherwise, your CT will get confused. So for this one, I'll also put salesman CT. So now we have this result basically. Now let's try to update CT. Okay. First, I'll comment this. Now update CT. Okay. Set customer CT, say Moscow. Or, well, we already have the Moscow, looks like. Let's say Boston. Okay, where customer name equals to, let's pick this from Moscow. Okay. And this equals this, where this equals this. And now let's try to run this query and see what happens. You see, in this, we one row gets affected. And if I select start from that CT, now we have Boston for this last person, right? Because the thing is, now we are only updating a value that is related to one base table. Okay. So in that case, you can actually update the CT with multiple tables. So that's why it says if a CT is based on more than one table, and if the update affects only one base table, then the update is allowed. Now imagine if a CT is based on multiple tables, and if the update statement affects more than one base table, then the update is not allowed. Okay. You see, in this case, what it's saying is now they're updating both gender and department name. And the gender from the employee table, department name comes from the department table. So that means when your update statement affects more than one base table, in this case, this is the employee table is one base table, department table is another base table, right? In that case, you cannot update the CT. Okay. Okay. Let's see that in action. For this one, I will put update is possible if one base table is affected. Okay. And now we'll see the second. Update is not possible, or let's say not allowed. Okay. So here also load if more than one base table is affected. So in this case, as we're saying, this customer city, we're updating the city column, right? Where the customer name equals to this. And since this one column is present only in one table, then update is possible. So basically, this update statement is affecting only one of the base tables. Okay. We have two base tables, right? Within the CT, we have customer table and now we have salesman table. Two base tables, right? My update statement only updates or only changes the customer table. So that's why it says update is allowed if one base table is affected. In our case, only the customer table is affected, right? That's why the update is possible. Now, let me copy this again and try to update both at the same time. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have this, and this, right? Let's try to update the CT columns for both tables. In this column is the customer CT, which comes from the customer table. And this column is the salesman CT, which comes from the salesman table. And now let's try to update both of them in one update statement. So now we'll put customer CT equals to Boston and salesman CT equals to Austin. Okay, where let's pick another, this Fabian Jones. Okay, so in this case, I'm trying to update both tables from that because it comes from the customer table and salesman CT column, which comes from salesman table, and at the same time, I'm trying to update both of them.
Yeah.
And now let's see what happens. You see, I will get an error that says view or function CTE is not updatable because the modification affects multiple base tables.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Like what I'm saying here in this statement is basically I'm telling the SQL Server update, right? Update the customer city to Boston and salesman city to Austin, where the customer name is Fabian Jones, right? So what I'm saying is, like, in real life, if you put this update statement to real life and look at the meaning of this, what I'm saying is, okay, I have this customer whose name is Fabian Jones, and he moved to Boston. His city used to be something else. Now his city used to be Paris. Now he moved to Boston. His salesman moved to Austin at the same time.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say in this update statement. Well, it's like possible technically.
Yeah.
But that is wrong. Something wrong to do. Like, you cannot update both customers and salesman city based on only customer information. Okay? Basically, what you're saying is, okay, I have an information that customer moved to Boston. Therefore, we need to say that his salesman moved to Austin. You cannot, it doesn't make sense, right? Like, you cannot decide salesman based on the customer.
Yeah.
Unless you have information that that thing happened. But technically, even if that happens, you have to update them separately, okay? So what you can do is, you can actually do this. For now, I will comment this, and then comment this. And now if I run this one, it actually updates the table, okay? So now I updated this Fabian Jones city to Boston. He used to live in Paris, now he lives in Boston, see? Okay, and now, so this happens when your customer moves from one place to another, and now you have to update the information that you have, right? So now it means that they moved to Boston, and if I want to, if their salesman also moved from Paris to Austin, then I can do the same thing separately for the salesman now. So now I can comment this and comment this, okay, and then run this, okay. And if I see, so this customer moved to Boston, the salesman moved to Austin.
So what you just did comment and where you put Austin? Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's here. You see?
Okay, yeah, date, yeah. So separate up.
Yeah. So basically, I commented this part. Now I have only this part, right?
Yeah.
This commented part doesn't get executed. What I did is I just updated this both, but separate.
Yeah. So we can do it separate.
Yeah, you can do it separately because in that case, your update statement will affect only one table, right?
Yeah.
Just like in above case.
Mm-hmm.
If your update statement affects only one table, you see, if one base table is affected, it's allowed. If it affects more than one base table, then it's not allowed, okay? And that, again, makes sense, like in real life. You cannot say just because, one thing changed, you cannot say the other is changed at the same time, right? I mean, that is technically possible, and if that even happened, then you can update them separately.
Yeah.
Basically, just to secure data loss or wrong. Okay, because the thing is, when you are selecting from the CTE, right?
Yeah.
You might not understand like what's happening. Like, of course, in this case, we know these tables are being joined and all that. But if you don't know that what table is what and whatever is happening, if someone else gave you this CTE and you're just running it and you want to update it, just by looking at the result, you don't know which column is coming from where. And what you're saying is, based on this, update this and this. Based on one value in one table, you're trying to update another value in another table. Okay, that is incorrect. So what I'm saying is based on this Fabian Jones, which is a value that comes from the customer table, I'm trying to update this table, Austin, like a salesman table. I can do that, but I can do one at a time, okay?
Yeah.
So if you really want to do it, you have to do one at a time, or you can basically just update the actual table. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is the point here that they're trying to say. In this case, they're also doing, they're trying to update the gender that comes from the employee table and department name that comes from the department table. And it's not allowed because this will affect both the tables.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And now, so this is the rest of the CTR on two base tables. Another note is that if a CT is based on more than one base table, if it affects only one base table, the update succeeds. Not as expected always. Well, not expected always. That means you might have some data loss or some other stuff. But this is also we just saw. If you do it separately, it updated because if you look at it, if you do it separately, it just becomes just like one table. Like this update will affect only one table,
Yeah.
which is allowed. Okay. So if you do separately, it succeeds. That means, yes, you can update. Okay, and there's some notes that you can take. So about the updatable CTEs. The first is if a CTE is based on a single base table, then the update succeeds and works as expected. If a CTE is based on more than one base table, and if the update affects multiple base tables, the update is not allowed and the statement terminates with an error. And if a CTE is based on more than one base table, and if the update affects only one base table, the update succeeds, but not as expected always. Because
Third one amended, yeah? The third one.
yeah, third one, it will update the table, but the point here is it says not always as expected. The meaning of that is these two tables might be referenced, right? It might be a child table for some other parent table. And imagine if instead of updating, if you delete something, not knowing that it's being referenced by another table, then that reference, the parent table, the records in the parent table will become orphan records. Orphan record means there is a reference for that record. For example, let's say if in this case, let's imagine that if I also select the ID also, right? Customer ID. And let's say these tables are referenced by each other, with each other. And if you remember the foreign key and primary key relationship, so your parent table would have an extra column, like in this case, if I say start from customer, okay? Basically, the salesman and customer tables in this case are not like they don't have primary key foreign key relationship. Imagine if they had primary key foreign key relationship. Now, if they had primary key foreign key relationship, that would mean this salesman table would be the child table that is being referenced by customer tables salesman ID, right? It would mean, since this is a foreign key based on the salesman table's ID column, this should only have the values that exist here, right? Now imagine, without knowing, you deleted one of these from the salesman table. Now imagine like we have, it looks like we don't even have any common, but let's say this 5008 exists also here, right? And then if I delete this, but this will, 5008 will still stay here, right? That means this 5008 will become an orphan record because there is no parent for it, for this record.
Yeah.
Because in this case, the salesman ID column is a foreign key, and it's sitting the child in this customer table. The parent table for this salesman ID is the ID column, this salesman table, the ID column of the salesman table. This is the parent table, right? And now imagine I deleted the parent table, one record from the parent table, and the child is still here. But there is no parent for that child. So this child will, so this child will become orphan. You know what orphan means, right? Like
yeah.
So orphan is like someone who doesn't have. That's the basic. The foreign key primary key relationship. The concept behind it is that this values should be limited to these values. cannot have any other value that doesn't exist here.
Mm-hmm.
But then, not unknowingly, say, you delete one of the rows that are actually being referenced here,
Mm-hmm.
then this will become an orphan record, and that is what they mean here, but not as expected always. Okay?
Yeah.
So basically, you will create an orphan record without knowing it. Okay. So these are the three notes that you should remember about PT. Okay. Let's move on. Recursive CT. This might be a little difficult, so I will leave it to next class for tomorrow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is a little confusing. So let's do something easier now, since we did already like what 2 or 3 topics already. I don't want you to get confused. Let's try. Okay, these are all concepts. I guess we can see the triggers. Okay.
Let's start there.
Yeah. So as I said before, triggers are not suggested to be used.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Derive tables on top of common table expression.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do the derive tables. Okay. Yeah.
Let's our topic.
Derive table is it's very close to the topic, and it's relatively easy concept to understand. Okay. Okay, so derive tables and common table expressions, and then compare with views, table variable, local and global temporary tables. Okay. We should have done this before doing the CT, but it's okay. We're going backwards now. That's fine. Okay, views. I guess we will compare views and derive tables and table variables, all that. But as we already know, view is saved SQL statement, right?
Yeah.
So you can basically have any SQL statement, put that into a view, and then you can select select the data from that view. Okay. So the point is, the views get saved in the database.
Yeah.
Okay? As I was mentioning earlier, if you create a view, you will actually see the view in that views folder of the database, right? Like creating views in this database.
In the case with indexed views, yeah, I guess.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. The point is the views will get saved in the database. You see, 1, 2, 3, 4 views.
Yeah.
So this means they are taking some space. Okay, so they are being saved in homework database views folder. See? So that's what it's saying. Views get saved in the database and can be available to other queries and store procedures. So the thing is, since the view is saved in the database, you can reference that view anywhere. Okay, like in a separate select statement, in a store procedure, it doesn't matter because that view is saved.
Yeah.
But saw that CTE can be referenced only by the SQL statement that comes immediately after the CTE. In this point, like from this perspective, CTEs are not as flexible as views because you cannot access a CTE from anywhere and from any SQL statement.
Yeah.
Okay. So from that perspective, CTE is not as flexible as views. But however, if this view is only used at this one place, it can be easily eliminated using other options like CTE or derived tables or temp tables or table variables and etc. You see, in SQL Server and in any developer job, like it can be SQL developer, you can be Java or whatever, .NET, whoever, whichever developer, you have to know what can be used where and which is the efficient tool to be used in a specific situation. If I put it in a simple language, for example, you do not use a chainsaw to cut the bread.
Yeah.
Bread is soft. You can use a simple knife. You don't have to use a chainsaw for that, right? Or you do not use you cannot use the let's say you don't use like a paintbrush to brush your teeth, right? Paintbrush is too big for your teeth. You have to use the toothbrush. So what I'm trying to say is you have to choose the right tools for the goal that you're trying to achieve. So you don't have to use a view if you want to reference this result only in one place. Okay, a CTE can do the same job for you, and it will not be saved in the database, and it will not waste your storage or anything. Okay, but if you want to reference that result across all the servers, across all the instances, then you have to use the views because CTE is not saved in the database, and CTE will not achieve that goal for you. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that you have to know which tool is the right tool to achieve your goals in that specific situation.
Yeah, that's why we need to know the difference. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why you need to know the difference. Okay. So the difference here is views or store procedures or functions, they are actually saved in the database and can be accessed throughout the servers and instances of the SQL Server. Whereas CTE or temp tables are not saved like permanently. CTE is the least flexible in these terms because it will disappear right after the first SQL statement.
Yeah.
You can only access a CTE with only one SQL statement that follows the CTE immediately. Okay, so in this point, like the access perspective, CTE is the weakest.
Yeah.
And then temp tables, we have seen the temp tables, they are probably the second, well, actually they are the third, derived tables are the second, I would say. But the temp tables are the, let's say, third most flexible because they will be temporarily saved in the database until you close that session, if you remember. When we were learning the temp tables, when you create the temp table, it gets created in the temp DB. And then when you close the SQL server or that window that created this temp table, it will disappear. Okay. So in this, from that perspective, the temp tables can be saved or can be stored for a longer time. Okay. And derived table, it comes like in the middle of this CTE and the temp tables. Let's now let's look at the temporary tables. So temporary tables are stored in the tempdb, and local temporary tables are visible only in the current session and can be shared between nested stored procedure calls. And then global temporary tables are visible to other sessions and are destroyed when the last connection referencing the table is closed. So if you see this is more flexible than the CTE because at least it can be used, the tables can be used by, if it's a global temporary table, it can be used by other sessions until the last session closes. Or the temporary table, if it's local, it can be at least used by the session that created the temporary table, and it will disappear once that session is closed. So if you compare this temp table to CTE, from access standpoint, temporary tables are more flexible than CTEs because they at least get stored for a temporary period of time. Okay, so now based on your requirement, like, do you want to be able to use that result until you close this session, or do you want that result only for this, one SQL statement? Based on that, you choose which one to use. If you want this only for one select statement, then you might as well just create a CTE. Okay. And but if you want this to be, if you want to reference that result set until the end of the day, I guess, then you might as well just put that into a temporary table. Okay.
Yeah.
So, like in real life scenarios, for example, when do we use the CTEs is, imagine you have this long select statement with multiple tables joined, right? So now we have, say, 4 tables, we join 4 tables, and then they bring all this, 5 columns. And I want to take account on the result that it's bringing, right?
Yeah.
So to do that, so I need the count only for this moment, right? I only want to know the count, and then that's it.
Yeah.
For that, I'll just put that whole SQL statement into a CTE, and then I'll just run a count statement, aggregate function. Because I only want to know the count for this moment and then report that, and that's it. Forget about it. Yeah. That I don't have to save that all data in a table or anything. I just need a CTE for that, right? But if I want to use that count in a report, then I will have to store that at least into a table, and then I do my reports and everything, and then that table can be dropped after I'm done with the report. Okay, so that is like a kind of real life scenarios when you can use which CTE or temporary tables. Okay. Yeah. And then there's another thing called table variable. But this table variable, like personally, I don't really like the table variables because they have a little complicated syntax. Okay. But it is also good to know. So table variable, just like temp tables, variable is also created in tempdb. And the scope of a table variable is the batch, or a store procedure, or a statement block in which it is declared. And they can be passed as parameters between procedures. So if you look at this, what is basically happening here is, if you remember, there was table valued functions that you would declare a variable and then save the result of the statement into that variable. So it's like similar to that. So basically what you do is you declare the TBL employee count, and if you pay attention, it starts with @ sign, which means it's a variable. It's a variable, but it stores table.
Yeah.
Okay. So you declare the variable, and then you say it will store a table value. It means that it will actually store a table result set. And then you actually define the columns in that table variable, like department name and the data type and so on and on. And then you say insert and then give the employee count, the variable name, and then you do your select statement, this and that and that. And when you run this result of this select statement gets inserted into this table variable. Okay. Now you can select department name, total employees from this table variable. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a CT, but it's somewhere between the CT and the temp table. It looks like CT because it for that batch when you run this, and it's similar to temp table because it gets stored in the temp database.
Yeah.
Huh? And it can be passed as a parameter between procedures. You can basically pass this as a parameter value. We'll come back to this later.
Procedures, yeah.
Yeah. Basically, just imagine this is also a simple variable, but instead of storing 1 or 2 data, like rows or values, it will store the whole table. It's like a, if you remember, we were referencing the variables or parameters as a bucket, right? It's a bucket that basically stores something for you so that you can use it in the future. Now imagine this is like a huge bucket. It will not only store one value, it can, store whole table. Okay. And now derived table. This is like my favorite after CTEs because it's very easy syntax. Okay. Basically, what you do is you can use the derived table anywhere in the statement. But the thing is, they're only available in this context. In this case, what it's doing is, you see, select department name, total employees from. Usually, you would give after from, you would provide the table name, right?
Yeah.
Instead of that table name, you can write another select statement. You see?
Yeah.
And basically, this is like a subquery.
Yeah, like a subquery. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, subqueries were usually used in the where clause, but this is a subquery that can be used in the from part. Okay. So basically, you're opening and closing the bracket and writing this query, and from the result of this query, you are selecting this and that. Okay. Like, if you want to take a look at that in action, we can say, let's copy this join statement. Derived tables. If you look at the name itself, it's saying that it's a table that is derived from other, select statement or whatever. So basically, we are deriving a whole new table from this statement now. Okay. So if I run this statement, this gives me this and this and that, right? And what I can say now is, I can basically say, select, let's say customer name and customer CT. Okay. Select cost name, CT, okay. And then I can say from, and then open close the bracket and put this select statement into the between the brackets. Basically, what I'm saying is select the CT and then customer name from the result of this select statement. You can look at it as subquery.
Yeah.
And there is one thing that you should remember. You have to alias for this query, okay? So I will call it an A. You must have an alias, okay? Without alias, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now I guess it's not the CT, but it's the customer CT. Okay? And if I run this, the customer name and customer CT. Okay?
So from final result, we get customer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what's happening is this subquery, if we look at it, well, basically this is called the derived table. Okay?
Yeah.
But in our terms, we can call it also a subquery. So the first subquery is being executed. Usually the inner query gets executed and it gives you this result. And from this result, we are selecting the customer CT. Okay, so when I execute this, I get this customer name and customer CT from the result of this query. Okay?
Yeah.
And the important point to remember here is you must have this alias. So if I remove this alias, it wouldn't work. You see? It says syntax error. So you must have some sort of alias. It doesn't matter what you call it, but you have to have an alias. I can say B or whatever. And then if I execute this, I'll get the result. Okay? And then I can actually filter that also. I can say outside that brackets, I can say where, say customer CT equals to London, for example. Okay? See? So this is called a derived table. Okay, this part is the derived table. I am basically deriving or creating a table from the result of this subquery. Calling that a B table. Okay, I'm giving this table a name B, alias. Okay? I can say customer name, or I can say B.customer name and B.customer CT. Okay, this would be the correct way of doing it. Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, I am putting a select statement inside the brackets, and I am calling the result of that select statement B. So now the result of that select statement becomes B table. I take from that B table this columns. This is a little more flexible than the CTE because this can be, say, you can have multiple select statements as long as they are in one batch. Okay. But for example, if I select, say, B, let me copy this. Select this from B, this doesn't work. Okay, just like the CTs. If I am outside this batch, this is called a batch.
Yeah.
It's already not recognized. Okay, so this is also just like the CT. It will only be recognized as part of this batch. Okay, And you can also put this whole thing into another, say, derived table and call this C. And now now the result of this becomes the C table. And now I can select, say, C customer name. Okay. This C table. If I run this, I get only the customer name. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating one derived table, and from there I am getting this result, and I'm putting that also into another derived table that's called C. So the final result is the C table, and I am filtering that C table here, and I'm selecting the customer name from that C table. This is just like the subqueries.
Yeah.
Only difference is we're using the subquery in the from part.
Yeah. Syntax is easy. Yeah.
Yes, the syntax is very easy. That's why I like it. You just have to use little imagination, and that's all. Like, you know, way would be start executing it from the inside, from the most inner query. That's what you understand. Like, if I execute this to most inner, I get this result. From that, I am selecting the customer name and customer CT. So if I execute until here, I get this result. From here, I am only selecting the customer name and where the CT equals to London. So I should be able to get this and this, but only the customer names for this to London. Brad Guzman and Julian Green. So if I do that's what I'm getting. Okay. So now it's up to you when to use which. You can use any of this in almost any situation, but depending on the requirement, you have to be able to choose the right tool. Okay. So if you only need this as a temporary result, then you can use this derived table. You don't have to save it anywhere. So derived table, this is not being stored in anywhere also. So this doesn't get stored in the database also. The only thing that gets stored in the database is the views and temp tables, and then the table variables. So, so employee count is a derived table. See, this select statement is the derived table.
Derived table, yeah.
Yes. And you have to always remember that you have to have an alias.
Yeah.
Without the alias, it doesn't work. So here what they're doing is they're selecting this from, this from here, they're getting this. Okay. And now the CT. So CT, as we already saw, it is a temporary result set that is defined within the execution scope of a single select, insert, update, delete, or create view statement. So the CTE can only be referenced by the SQL statement that follows immediately. After that, it's not recognized. Okay. So SET is similar to a derived table in that it's not stored as an object and lasts only the duration of the query. Okay. So it lasts only for the duration of the query. So if you want to see the CTE, you have to execute all this query together. Then only it works. Otherwise, it doesn't work. That is what's called it lasts only for the duration of the query. Okay, it's not saying it lasts only for the duration of the session. The temporary tables, right? Temporary tables can be referenced until the session is closed. or views or simple regular tables that will last until you drop them. This will only last in the duration of the query only. So drive table and CT, they only last for the duration of that query. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're like very, very temporary tables. Okay. Okay, so that is the differences between the derived table, CTE, and the table variables. So does it make sense so far? Okay.